Halfway through the grueling 500-mile El Camino de Santiago trek, which winds its way through mountains, forests, and endless fields, and where towns are a day apart at best, a former Brat Pack member and famous actor falls to his knees and starts crying uncontrollably. He has a total meltdown. But it's a turning point for Andrew McCarthy, who would go on to travel the world for a living and become an award-winning writer and critically acclaimed novelist.
I knew I couldn't go back.
You just put it out there.
She said you've got less than a year to live.
Just dug even
Luck
deeper.
is the residue of design.
Nobody else was doing it, so why couldn't I?
That was the turning point.
Welcome to the BUCKiT Podcast with Phil Keoghan. Every week I talk to mavericks, disruptors, and innovators. People who ditch the excuses, swerve off the predictable road, and epitomize what it means to tick it before you kick it.
I was really seeing the colors very distinctly and brightly, and I was hearing acutely, and I was like, I'm really present right now. And then I got this sensation that I realized what it was that I'd forgotten what I wasn't carrying that morning was this sense of fear that I'd always inhabited my whole life.
If you remember the 80s, then Andrew McCarthy needs no introduction. He's a famous actor, appearing in iconic movies like Pretty in Pink and St. Elmo's Fire. He's also a well-respected director, having worked on series including Orange is the New Black for Netflix and The Blacklist and The Enemy Within for NBC. What might surprise many people is that Andrew McCarthy is also an award-winning travel writer, and his first novel, a coming-of-age story, landed him on the New York Times bestseller list. He's definitely a tick-it-before-you-kick-it kind of guy who faces his fears head-on, constantly taking on new challenges and reinventing himself while staying true to his passion. Andrew's work with National Geographic Traveler magazine takes him all over the world, and I caught up with Andrew recently after he'd just stepped off a long flight from Budapest. He was in desperate need of a good pick-me-up, so the conversation quickly turned to what makes the perfect cup of tea. And Andrew should know, after all, he's been all over the world. I was mentioning your tea, Andrew. What kind of tea are you drinking?
This is just a Japanese sencha tea.
Okay.
Green tea. And the reason I drink that is because I drink many different teas, but I became a tea snob. I did a travel story about tea. I went to Darjeeling to do a story looking for the perfect cup of tea a number of years ago for a magazine, and I learned all about tea, and so I became a tea snob.
What do we not know about tea that we should know about tea?
Tea is fascinating, actually. This most simple thing that I had no idea was that, because of all these different teas, green tea, black tea, white tea, they all come from the same tea leaf. It's all how it's processed. There's only one tea leaf, yeah. And so they all start the same. Tea estates are like these fiefdoms. They're like these worlds unto themselves because they're like indentured servants. These women have the basket on their back, and for 12 hours a day, they're picking leaves, dropping them in the basket. And they're totally taken care of from soup to nuts. Their entire health care, their housing, everything is taken care of by the sort of lord and master of the tea estate. And yet they're sort of indentured because they can't leave because they don't make enough to go out into the world. And yet they want to be there because all their family's taken care of and everyone is, for life, taken care of. Even when you're old and stop working, they don't kick you out because your family's there and you're part of the community. And so it's a double-edged sort of the golden cage. But they all treat the sort of tea, the head of the tea estate, as this lord and master. I just thought, it was a fascinating microculture that I had no idea about when I went.
And
this is in Darjeeling. I don't know how it's done in other places.
Yeah, we were there for Amazing Race, and
it's a cool place, isn't it?
Just so amazing to see just these rolling hills of these beautiful tea plants, and the way that they cut the leaves, where they have this sort of pickup basket, and then you clip it, and it falls down into a little basket.
Yeah. I never drank any caffeine at all until I met my wife, who was Irish, years ago and got me addicted to tea.
She likes Irish tea.
Well, she likes Irish. She drinks the dregs, Irish tea. But yeah, but they, because they come from that English culture of...
Right. I think what's really fascinating about digging into your history is, of course, everybody knows you because you've been captured on film, and you're going to be forever captured on film. But you're doing a lot of directing. Just talk about that, because that's something that you're obviously really passionate about now. You've been able to use all those skills from when you were younger.
Yeah, I mean, that's a longish kind of story, but yes, I do a lot of television directing now, and which I like. I like a lot. I mean, as I got old, I think I was never in a certain way cut out to be, I became very successful very quickly and became very public very quickly when I was young. And my personality type is probably not suited for that.
Right.
I didn't like being out front like that. And I found it shocking. And I felt very exposed and vulnerable, and I had no idea how to handle it and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think my personality type was really suited to be. I wanted to be an actor when I was young, because I went on, when I was 15 years old, I was in a play in high school, and I walked out on stage and I suddenly felt like me for the first time. It's like I went, oh, there I am. Tennessee Williams has this line about a room that had always been half in shadow was suddenly in the light. That's how I felt about myself. The first time I walked on stage when I was 15 in a high school play, I was, oh my God. The whole, my life just sort of came into, there I am. And so I said, I'm doing that. And so I went and did that.
What was it about that? What was the thing that you got when you stood there and you were in that?
I don't know. I just felt like me. I felt comfortable in my skin. I felt like this is where I just, my wife is Irish, like I said to you earlier, and she has all these great sayings, and one of them is, I felt like myself from the toes up. I walked out on stage as the Artful Dodger and Oliver, and I felt like myself from the toes up. And I had no idea that would happen to me. I just was out there. And it wasn't the applause and the laugh. It was just, I'm like, this is where I fit.
I can do this.
This is where I fit.
Yeah.
It wasn't even whether I could do it or not do it. It was just like, I feel like me in a way that I've never felt like me, so I wanted to pursue that.
Yeah.
And, but that said, as I became very successful very quickly through good fortune, I wasn't well suited to that, I don't think, in a certain way.
Maybe the stuff off the stage, the stuff that came with the
people coming in. Fame is a weird thing, and
Yeah.
fame. And I've said many times I wouldn't wish fame on anyone under 30.
And why is that?
Well, you don't know who you are when you're in your early 20s, and you
Yeah.
have people coming at you, and sort of you're suddenly never private, and all the things that people say about fame, and it has wonderful aspects to it, and it's I don't know who I would be now had that not happened to me. It altered the trajectory of my life in a very real way. I think fame alters people, as on a cellular level. It changes how you are in the world. It changes your sense of privacy about yourself. It changes everything, your self-awareness, that third eye you're always watching yourself with, all that stuff. And I didn't particularly like it. I just was ill-equipped to handle it in a certain way, temperamentally. And so I withdrew from it, So as I continued, but I wanted to keep doing what I do, and I love telling stories in that way, I guess, is the simplest way. So I knew a lot. I'd been on so many sets and worked with so many directors. It seemed a natural segue to just sort of go into directing, where I am a bit behind, and yet still it suits my ego because it's very singular. There's only one of them on the set, and everyone looks to you in that way, and yet it's like I'm laying brick. I am applying a skill as opposed to being the thing. And so I like that, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
And people ask me often what the difference is. I say acting causes anxiety and directing is stressful, but that's different. They're different things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I fell into directing. I didn't really fall into it. I actively wanted to do it and sort of, pursued it.
When you work with a director, different types of directors, you take all of that and then you apply it into your own life, and then you suddenly realize you're the guy in charge. You're the one making the
the first day when you walk out and you go, okay, guys, we're going to be over here, and everybody goes over there. You're like, wow. Really?
This is powerful. This is amazing.
So the thing people ask me, sometimes these sort of new directors kind of come and follow and sort of to see, and I said, just, even if you don't believe it, you're acting. Okay, guys, you take the stage. Yeah. 60 people are looking at you for what to do, and just take the stage. We're going to do this. We're going to start here. We're going to shot there. And even if inside you're going like that, you just take stage.
Yeah, a friend of mine who's a director said exactly the same thing. He says sometimes he has absolutely no idea what the hell he's going to do, but he knows it's meant to happen over there. So it's like, all right, everybody move over there. And he thinks that'll give him enough time while they're moving to figure out what to do when he gets over there.
I do it all the time. I mean, and, because you think, and then you get there and you realize, no, or the actor wants to do something else. And it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Okay, let's just read the words once. No acting. Let's just read the words. And all the time they're reading, I'm not even listening. I'm just thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to do? You're buying yourself time. But yeah, it's a form of acting too. But also you don't have to know. You just have to know. The better you get at it, the more willing you are to say, I don't know, and to allow, you've hopefully hired creative people and let them
collaboration
fill in the spaces.
Yeah. So where did travel come into your life? Did it start initially as a form of escape from what you were talking about before, where you've just felt like the whole world was looking in on you?
I traveled a lot for work, but you're always staying in nice hotels, and it's really about work and all that stuff. And so I hadn't traveled a lot on my own, and I was in a bookstore and I picked up a book by a guy named Jack Hitt called Off the Road, and he had quit his job, sold his apartment, and walked along the Camino de Santiago in the north of Spain. And I had never heard of the Camino de Santiago, which is this 8th century pilgrim's route that if you walked across it, you got half your time in purgatory knocked off, that's a good deal, right?
Everybody
right? It's a good deal. So I read that book. I don't know why, I had no interest in it. I just I was on a plane, I read it, and by the time I landed, I was like, I'm doing that. I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm doing that. So I called up Jack Hitt, because this is in the early 90s and there was no internet, and
you just picked up the phone and
called? Yeah, because I had never heard of the Camino. Like, where do you look up the Camino? There was no such thing as an internet, except for, Al Gore is the only one on the internet, right? And so in the back of the book, it said he worked for Harper's Magazine. So I called up Harper's Magazine and I said, can I talk to Jack Hitt? And they went, yeah, hold on. I went,
no way.
yeah. And so I said, and he goes, yeah, hi, Jack Hitt. And I'm like, hey, Jack, listen, it's Andy, I read your book. And he was like, you read my book, dude? And he was thrilled. And so anyway, he told me about how you do it, kind of just basically nothing. You go there and there are yellow arrows painted all across the north of Spain. You can follow yellow arrows for 500 miles. You don't need a map, you don't need anything. And they're little towns, one day apart, which sprung up in the 8th century for pilgrims to stop and be taken care of, And anyway, so I went and I did that. And it was awful. I hated it. I hated every second of it. And then halfway into the walk, I had a meltdown. There's these fields of wheat in the middle of Spain, the High Meseta, and so I just had a temper tantrum. I just started weeping and sobbing in the middle of this, and I had no idea why. And my tantrum ended, and I, wiped the snot from my nose and picked up my walking stick and walked on. And the next morning I woke up and I set out walking again, and I felt like I was forgetting something. I felt like I didn't have something. I had in my backpack, all of my stuff. So I just felt different. And an hour later, a couple hours later, I took my little morning break by the side of the barn. I'm eating my cheese, my little glass of water, hating being there. And I became aware that I was really seeing the colors very distinctly and brightly. And I was hearing acutely. And I was like, wow, I'm really awake. I'm woke, as we say now. I'm really present right now. And then I got this sensation that I realized what it was that I didn't have with me, what I'd forgotten, what I wasn't carrying that morning, was this sense of fear that I'd always inhabited my whole life, that it was so a part of my life that I never even knew of its existence until that moment of its first absence, and it was a real awakening. Yeah. And I felt like, and then that went back to when I was 15 years old and walking out on stage as the Artful Dodger. That was the second time in my life I had that feeling of like, oh, there I am. And that I felt like myself from the toes up again. And it was the exact same sensation that I'd had then. And it was the only other time I'd ever had it. So with the acting, I want that. The only thing I've ever had the ability to do in my life is recognize those moments when they go by and grab at them. And how I'm going to do any of that, I don't know how I'm ever going to be an actor, but that's what I'm doing.
Wow.
And when that moment happened to me by the side of the barn, I went, I'm going to keep traveling because I'm doing this by traveling. So I'm going to keep traveling. So I kept traveling. And then I eventually started writing stuff down, and then that led to writing for magazines.
So you were how old when this happened?
That was, I was 30 years old.
Wow. So you went to
the
kid, lowest low, and then you...
But it wasn't even that. I mean, I just had a tantrum, the way we do. What's that ancient Greek or Chinese saying? Something it is solved by walking, and
right.
I was just walking. I'd walked myself. I'd burned off so much of my... that I finally dropped into myself. And what myself was terrified. I sobbed and feel like, how am I ever going to get out of here? And then I woke up the next day and it was lifted, So that changed my life.
You've said just that travel is so much about people, and when you are comfortable with the people that you're around, when you like the people that you're with, you feel grounded. You feel like you're at home, and you can find that anywhere. It doesn't have to be a physical home.
I'm a pretty loner person, and so one of the things that travel writing has given me in my travel is it's helped connect me to people, because I could go somewhere and not speak to anybody and still have it for a week and have a great time. But I'm being my own head. But travel writing, of course, you need to go out and get quotes. So I need to connect and ask you about stuff. And so it connects me to people. I think to a very real degree, travel is about the traveler, and not so much about anything else, and I feel, it's been the university of my life, traveling. So, and I've learned about myself to an extraordinary degree by going out of my comfort zone and asking for help from people, because that's what you have to do when you're traveling far from home. You have to ask for help, right? And so, and that is a vulnerable making feeling. And I think, vulnerability gets a bad rap. I think just go, hi, can you help me? If I say to you, can you help me? I can't pretend to be any of that crap that I go through the day with. You can't be, got it. You can't be anything except a person who needs help. And you're vulnerable, and then the person goes, yeah, I can help you. And you've met, and then you have connection. And of course, if you have that connection, you're connected to another person, but you're also then connected to yourself. And there you go, right? That's where the gold is.
You mentioned that you feel like you're alone, or you like to be alone. Where did that come from? Why do you think, there's a lot of people that are extroverts who get into acting, who feel the need to be around people and to feel the need to have this constant feedback from other people.
Yeah, I hate that.
You're like the antithesis of that, right? I mean, you don't need that, it seems.
I don't want that.
You don't want that.
I don't need it either. I certainly like people giving me a table at a restaurant, but I don't like, no. But, I read a book a number of years ago called Quiet, which is about introverts versus extroverts. And I never, because in our culture, the Western culture, everyone should be an extrovert, and people who aren't, and people who are, quote, shy, or it's like, that's something you can just get over. It's like
there's some stigma.
There's something wrong with that. And once you become an extrovert, you'll then be like the rest of us, and that'll be great, and you'll be able to fill the room.
Fulfill your life. Yeah.
One isn't better than the other. It's just being an introvert is simply another way of being in the world. And it doesn't, so I'm fairly introverted, and I can certainly go out and present, but I have no desire to be an extrovert. And I think it's a weird thing in our culture that extroverts are, praised, and that's what one should aspire to. Why? Why? Yeah. Many wonderful actors are introverts. I mean, Robert De Niro would hate giving an interview, and he's very much like, no eye contact, whatever. He doesn't want to be, then they're the Jack Nicholsons of the world. They're like, more,
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. It's just, certainly not me.
Different types.
Yeah. I mean, and why not?
I love this other quote of yours. It says, I'm a better version of myself when I'm far away. When you say far away, you mean far away from just out of your element? Like, what do you mean by that?
I think all those things we've been talking about, you get more in touch with who I am, because also travel liberates you. You're far from home, you're just sort of liberated. You can be sort of whoever you want to be, Yeah. But really, it's sort of like social media in the sense that you can try and pretend to have a persona, but the people that are successful on social media, and everyone eventually, it's just you that comes out. You is what, so when you're far from home, and it's just me that comes out, and I don't have to, and you're freed up from responsibilities and things at home. I'm more curious, I'm more open, I'm more everything when I'm away, and I'm not, as protected and guarded for some reason.
So, obviously, when you first started traveling, it was for yourself. It was something that you wanted to do for yourself. When did you decide then, well, maybe I want to share these travel experiences with other people?
I was in Saigon, and I was just traveling around, and I was walking down the street one morning. I mean, it was I can point to the moment exactly again. I'd walking down the street, and this kid pulled up next to me on the scooter and says, hop on, I'll give you a ride. I'm like, leave me alone. Teenage kid, 15 or something. And he goes, no, I give you a ride. I go, leave me alone. I give you a ride. And he wouldn't leave. And he was just shadowing me, he would not leave. So I hopped. So he goes, hop on. And I'm like, I hopped on. And he drove me around Saigon all day, showed me his Saigon, his
How amazing
world.
is that?
It's fantastic. And
just randomly just decided.
Well, he wanted $5. So,
okay.
I mean, come on. You give me $5, I show you Saigon, and so, and fine. And so he showed me, like cool. He showed me where his father had been arrested, like the public garden his mother used to do. He's a 15-year-old kid, doesn't know anywhere. He doesn't know where he should take me. Just knows he wants $5. And so so he shows me around all day. And I went back up to my hotel room that night, and for some reason, I just took out a piece of hotel stationery and I wrote it down. I just wrote down what happened. I wrote down, I'm an actor. I said so much bad dialogue. I know good dialogue when I hear it. So I wrote down the cool things that were said, the exchanges we made. Anyway, I wrote down that story. And when I finished writing that down, I had the same feeling I had by the side of the barn that I had when I was 15. I just went, oh, there I am. I'd never written anything in my life. I'd never written anything.
Was it scary? Because for a lot of people want to be writers. There are a lot of people who want to be writers. And then it's that scary process of then exposing yourself by putting it down on a piece of paper. It's there. It's in black and white. Did it frighten you at all, or did it just sort of flow out of you?
Well, I'd been already exposed myself so much to the world on a much more public level than that. By doing it alone in private first, I'm used to exposing myself. Yeah, my inner life. So that was no...
But the process of writing and someone reading it and critiquing
always you have to make it worthwhile for a stranger to invest their time in you. Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to be revealing and truthful, then you can't ask them to invest their time in you. So like what you play tricks on yourself, though. I mean, I'd be writing something and I would write, my really personal stuff. And I go, this is never going to be in the book. I mean, there's no way I'm putting this in. There's no way this is ever going to be. Well, I'll just keep finishing, but there's no way I'm ever going to put this in. And then, of course, you read and you go, that's the whole heart of the whole thing. And if you don't have that, nothing else matters. So
it's like acting in the sense that you really are opening yourself up.
Of course.
Like you just let it all...
Well, you have to
expose the whole thing.
But you need to, meet the people that way so that they can meet you, so that they can nod their heads and go, I identify with that. And then you have a connection the same way you have a connection when you're traveling. It's all about that connection, right? So if you don't make yourself available for the connection, if you don't go, can you help me? They can't help you. So if you don't go, here I am, they can go, oh, I'm that way too. Right. And then you've connection, go, I love this. I never want to go where he's going, but I like being with him when he goes because that's like me. I feel like that way too. So, right? So that's I intuitively knew that because I'd already been doing that my whole life, acting.
So this was the third time in your life then?
Yeah.
Big
that
pivotal
I felt
moment, like wow, I'm back on the stage again.
I'm just me. There I am. Yeah. That moment. Yeah. And so I then, again, because the only gift I have is to be able to recognize those moments. I recognize it and then pursued that. I kept traveling and kept writing for about 8 or 9 years before I showed it to anybody. I would write stories.
You wrote that long before?
Yeah. I would just go and I'd travel like little notebooks and I'd throw them in a drawer, come home, throw them in a drawer, until finally one day I said, I'm going to try and do this. Yeah. So, and then I ended up publishing a bunch of those stories later when I go, I have a story in Saigon. I was in Saigon once and publishing them. But yeah, I did it for a number of years before I had enough confidence to sort of feel like I'm okay with this.
And when was the point where you thought, okay, I want to share these stories and have these out there publicly?
I met a guy named Keith Bellows, who's an editor at National Geographic Traveler magazine. He's died, but he was an amazing guy. And I met him. Mm-hmm. I sought him out. I knew somebody who knew him, and I said, will you introduce me to him? Will he have a drink with me? And so I did. And I said, you ought to let me write for your magazine, dude. And he said, you're an actor, dude. And I said, yeah, but I can tell a story. That's what I do. And he thought that was a good answer. So it took me about a year to get him to, let me do a story. I finally said, look, if it doesn't work, you don't have to pay me. And he said, well, I can live with that. And so I went and I did a story, and it was successful. And then I did more and more, and it naturally grew. And then I won an award out. And the minute you win an award, as then you're an expert. So,
I'm interested to know what else is out there that you... Like, what pulls you to a story? You just came back from Budapest. I know you were scouting for a film, right? But what takes you to a place? Is it reading, researching?
I don't know. I mean, story takes me to place. When we were talking about tea earlier, but that story started with, I proposed to Keith. I said, Keith, what if I do a story looking for the best cup of tea in China? And he said, well, that's a good story, but I just did China in the magazine. I went, okay. What if I go looking for the best cup of tea in Darjeeling, India? And he went, go do it. You know what I mean? So it's always story. It's not location. Yeah. It's always story. I did a story about Tahiti, which I tell. And my wife wanted to go to Tahiti on vacation. But I can't call up Keith and go, Keith, my wife wants to go to Tahiti, and he goes, Andy, great story. So I go on the internet, and in 5 minutes, you can discover that 95% of the world's black pearls are farmed in Tahiti. So I go... So then my mother was having a birthday around the time. I called her up and I said, Mom, do you like pearls? She said, yeah, pearls are lovely, dear. So I called up Keith and I go, Keith, my mother has a big birthday coming up. And when I asked what she wanted, she got a faraway look in her eye. And she said, I remember once seeing a single black pearl hanging from a strand, Andrew, dear. I've never forgotten it. So good son that I am, Keith, I'm not going to go to Tiffany. I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to fly halfway around the world to the remote Tumo to Archipelago. I'm going to find a pearl farmer who's going to let me dive down 10 meters under the sea, yank the oyster from the bed, bring it up on the beach, slice that sucker open and pluck my mother's pearl, dripping wet from the sea, and bring it on home. And he can't get me on the plane fast enough to write that story, So my wife gets her vacation. The magazine gets a story. My mother gets a pearl, which I've never seen her wear, and, so it's all story-based,
Yeah. Well, just that in itself is a great story.
Yeah, no, it's
before
good.
you even got on the plane.
But that's one of those things, there's certain magazines where you just go, Tahiti, and they go, great. Bring it back. And you love working for those magazines. Then you show up in Tahiti and you go, what am I going to write about?
Yeah, what's
Whereas
the story?
like with Nat Geo, it's always like, what's the story? And so I knew before I got on that plane, I had made contact with a pearl farmer who was going to let me do that. Because, if you write a quest story, unless you're writing a book like, Snow Leopard or something, you better find your quest for magazine stories. Anyway, so anyway, I knew that I knew the end before I started.
Yeah.
That Bob Dylan line, I know my song before I start singing.
Yes.
Often that's the case. Not always, but often, I like that.
Yeah, I've always gravitated towards trying to do things like that. Like we did a film about retracing the 1928 Tour de France, and it's a combination of wanting to spend time with my parents who came on the road trip with us while we were shooting, going around France, which we love in the summer, riding a bicycle, shooting a film.
Perfect.
Spending time together, having fun.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if you can tick off a whole lot of
Yeah.
things and tick off a bunch of boxes, and everybody wins.
Yeah, that's great.
This book of yours, but it came out in 2012.
The Longest Way Home, that book.
The Longest Way Home. Financial Times said it was one of the best books of the year. So clearly a beautiful book. I'd be totally honest with you, I have not read the book, but we've ordered it and we want to read it. This is really the story of, I guess, of finding yourself. Is that how you would describe it?
It's travel memoir. It was really a story about how I was getting married, and I'd been engaged to my now wife for years, and
Were you one of those guys that just kept letting it go on, and people would be like, when are you guys getting married?
Yeah, until they stop asking.
Yeah.
On the surface, it was about commitment, but really I was committed. We had children, we had a life. I wasn't going anywhere, but it was that inherent problem of how do we keep our individuality and our singularity and yet be in community and being, how do we do both?
Yeah.
And that it's impossible, and yet we do it anyway because it's the only game in town. And, like I said earlier, by traveling is how I sort of found myself. And so I still had issues to sort of deal with about getting married. So I went as far away from you as I could get so that I could come home to you. So that's really what the book was about.
And your then girlfriend, now wife, very understanding. She'd sort of...
In the book, she's wonderfully tolerant. Yes.
In real life?
She's mostly very tolerant.
Mostly.
Yeah.
When are you coming home?
No, it's more like, don't bother coming home.
And so you went away, and how long did it take for you to...
Oh, well, I mean, honestly, these were also stories I was doing for magazines. I would go and come back, So they were all just assignments. But it was interesting that the minute we decided to get married, we're doing it now, we're going to get married in this time, I then booked myself up, being oblivious, compartmentalizing my life, I booked myself up with 6 months worth of stories that would keep me away from home. And so my wife, of course, then goes, you realize we finally decided to get married, and you're doing everything you can to get away.
Right.
And then I went, oh, I hadn't noticed.
That's true.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right.
Maybe there's a book in there.
Is she into travel?
Yeah. My wife's a great traveler. Yeah, and so but it's at the Joan Didion line. You find out what you're thinking by writing about it. I learned a lot about intimacy and my skittishness and things by writing that book. Yeah, it was very illuminating for me.
Your kids, you've got 3 kids. Are they also into travel? Do they?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great gifts we give our kids, right? Is creating little citizens of the world.
Yeah.
Like I said, my wife's from Ireland, so we go back. We have a home in Ireland. We go back and forth all the time, and we just were in Austria last week skiing. I think traveling with kids is amazing, right? It's the essence of sort of optimism in action is traveling with kids, because you're go out into the world and saying, receive us. You couldn't be more vulnerable than when, I remember I took my son to the Sahara years ago when he was like 8. I was doing a story, and
How incredible for an 8-year-old.
yeah, it was amazing. And people said, are you crazy? You're taking some Muslim country and you're going to the Sahara Desert? Were you out of your mind? It was an amazing experience. He had an incredible time.
Well, that does just bring up this whole idea of fear of travel, and so many Americans who are scared of travel. And one of the reasons that I love working on Amazing Race is that we've been able to show people that it is
it's one of the
safe to
great
travel.
things about that show is that it's just, the world is a wide, friendly place.
Yeah. Where does the fear come from?
Well, we're taught fear. Well, fear comes, I don't know where fear comes, but fear encroaches on all of us all the time. It's like water. It's always seeping. It's like sand, and when you live by the beach, it's always, you got to keep sweeping it out all the time. You do it once, it doesn't get rid of it. It keeps keeping back, fear. And, and politicians play on our fear all the time. So, for their own agendas. So, and that's it. My soapbox is that I'm American. I'm proud to be American. I wouldn't want to be anything but American, but America's an extraordinarily fearful place. We make many of our decisions based in fear. And if more Americans, 41% of Americans have passports now. I think half of us have ever used them. If more Americans left home, got on a plane and went somewhere, they would realize the world isn't as dangerous and horrible and out to get us as we're told it is. They'd come back changed by that. And they would change their 2 people, who would change those 2 people, and, they would change the world one trip at a time. But Americans are really fearful. And that would all, I've said where travel is the last best hope for the world. Yeah. Politicians are not going to do it, right? I mean, like your show does more for that than anything, because it's like, go out there. Oh my God, it's a wide, wondrous place. And you can experience that wonder in the world, and it's not a place to recoil from and buck up against and keep them out and all that. That's insane. That doesn't make any sense in the world. It's never the way the world is. It's just insane.
I always say to people, the biggest challenge we face is that if it bleeds, it leads. And so when anything wrong is happening around the world, it gets on the news. And so the majority of people, when they see the rest of the world, something bad is happening. And we're one of the few platforms in prime time where we can say, well, here's something positive that's happening in a country. And I get people stopping me and they said, did those Muslim people really help the teams when they were racing? I'm like, yeah, why are you surprised by that? Because they only associate Muslims with bad things. That's what they know. And Mark Twain quote.
Yeah, that travel's fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. I mean, that's stop right there. We're done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, talk about
everything.
That says it. And
totally.
The other thing that's surprising is how many people think that America, which is a safe country, is the safest country in the world. They can't quite believe that it's not the safest country in the world.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
look at all the statistics to show all the gun killings we have from Americans killing Americans with guns is so many more than terrorists have killed. All that. That's a ridiculous notion.
And with travel comes acceptance, and with acceptance, it just opens up our eyes to difference, and celebrating difference rather than criticizing difference. It's okay.
Difference is all just sort of transitory. I mean, I was doing a story in Jordan about Petra, but it became a story about I got a flat tire, and it was Eid, right, which is the second most holy day in the Islamic calendar. It's like Easter, I guess, or something. And so I got a flat tire. I had nothing. And so this mechanic came out dressed in his full white from head to toe, starched white. He was at his family, feast. He came out, left his family feast. So imagine a mechanic in America leaving Easter dinner to go out and help some Muslim change the tire. And this guy got all greasy, got all over everything, and he invited me back to his house to finish his feast with him. I mean, that's just their culture, is take care of strangers. That's such embedded in their culture. Yeah, was to help the stranger and things. So, and that's what my story became about. And just that notion, where do we, it's obvious where we get this idea, but this idea is generally very nothing to do with reality.
I say to people a lot of times the best travel adventures that I've had are where things have gone wrong.
Oh, sure. The minute I got a flat tire, I went, thank God I've got a story now. Otherwise, it was just going to be a bunch of old buildings in the desert.
But you didn't know it was going to play out as well as it did.
No, it was even better. It's like at a central casting. But yeah, you wait for something to go wrong.
It's like you got all the writers in and you went, all right, how do we make this really work? What's the dramatic turn here?
What's the Kurt Vonnegut thing? Get your hero up a tree and throw rocks at him. I mean, you want bad stuff to happen.
Yeah. This is another great quote of yours. You said, I've found loneliness on the road to be expansive, opening of self, whereas loneliness at home can feel like deprivation.
God, that is good.
Isn't that good? Jesus, you're right up there with Mark Twain.
I don't know about that, but yeah, I think that's very true.
So
you know,
true.
because it opens up, it bellies out, and you just sort of drop into yourself. There's nowhere to go with that one except to sort of be in it. And I think people don't travel alone. I'm a big believer in solo travel, and people don't travel alone because they're afraid of physical safety or loneliness. Very strongly loneliness, and they blame it on physical safety. But I always say I'm no one to tell a woman where they're going to go feel safe, but they'd probably be just as safe walking down the streets of most cities in the world as they are walking down the streets of New York or Dallas, Texas, or wherever. You know. So I don't buy any of it. You know, I'm not a danger junkie. I don't go into funky places, and I don't, you know, but, and loneliness is, look, we're lonely. We're alone a lot. People make terrible decisions to avoid loneliness in their lives. Terrible decisions. And come to terms with being with yourself, then you don't make those decisions as, you know, and then you're bringing other people into your crap too by making bad decisions because you're afraid of loneliness. Then you've got a situation with someone and you mess people up.
I think one of the things we share too is a passion for being immersive in the culture and the place and embracing being out of your element, as opposed to, oh, well, we're going to go to a foreign country, but we're going to essentially be in an environment that replicates where we've just come from. You know, like people just go to a hotel and they check in and they don't leave the compound. And it's sort of like, well, the only difference is you're sucking air that's in a different country, but really.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, you go. Yeah, I mean that says it all. Of course, it's ludicrous, and yet that's what we do all the time. And I believe to travel closer to the ground, as close to the ground as you can travel, the better. You know, I'll often give myself a soft landing if I'm going halfway around the world. First night I'll stay in a nice hotel so I know they'll receive me. I got a good bed, and then I don't have a reservation beyond that, and I get out of there because you know all I'm going to get is. The concierge is going to tell me where to go, and that's just the closer to the ground I travel, the better experience I have, without question.
Which is one of the reasons that I love working when I travel, because it forces me to be with people who are local, and so they invite me into their home. I go to their local coffee shop. I'm essentially a part of their world, as opposed to even being a tourist. So people say, well, don't you want to just travel on your, you know? And I go, well, I do like that. But I just love working. Like I remember working with some guys in Egypt at the foot of the Sphinx who were running the jib while we were shooting Amazing Race, and they ordered Pizza Hut at the foot of the Sphinx. And you look off and we see the pyramids, and I'm like, you guys eat Pizza Hut? He was like, yeah, of course we do. We love Pizza Hut.
Here comes the bike messenger across the desert.
we were fighting so hard to like, hey, what do we have? What's local? What do we have? The guy's like,
the pepperoni.
Well, we love Pizza Hut. I'm like, Pizza Hut? You got to be kidding me. Man. People worry about bad things happening to them. What advice do you give people who are maybe wanting to stretch themselves just a little bit? Maybe they're not as adventurous as you and can go to the middle of the Sahara. But what's a first step that somebody could make who maybe has never really stretched themselves traveling?
Start somewhere where they speak English. I mean, go to Ireland. Ireland's one of those great places that it meets your preconceptions in your mind exactly. You know, and they're incredibly friendly. All you have to do is walk in and go, hi, where's, and suddenly you're in a relationship. You know, they love to chat and love strangers. I just go, just go. It doesn't matter where you go, just start.
Yeah.
It's going somewhere. The minute I fall into it too, it's like, oh, I don't want to go there. What a hassle, blah, blah, but it's really fear. And the minute I get there, I go, oh, that wasn't so hard.
Yeah.
I'm a little jet lagged. Got a headache, but I'm good. But, just go anywhere.
Yeah. The other thing that people use as an excuse for not travel is they talk about the fact that they just can't afford to travel.
Yeah, it's a bunch of crap, isn't it? I mean,
So just explain
and then but that goes back to what we're saying is like the closer to the ground you travel, the better experience you're going to have.
Right.
I did a story for a magazine about staying in a 5-star hotel and then staying in the the cheapest little thing I could imagine. And on day 3 when I was in this really cheap place, they gave me a new towel. And I was like, oh, I got a fresh towel. That was really nice. Thank you so much. I went and checked into the 5-star hotel, and I drank my green tea the first day, and my private butler hadn't restocked it on the second day. And I went, where's my green tea? I was like, in this quick, I had become that horrible version of myself. Whereas like the day before, I was like, oh, a new fresh towel. Thank you so much. But now I'm more yelling at my butler for my green tea, So I'm a better, like we've been saying, I'm a better version when I travel that way, and it's just cheaper. You can find it's just nonsense that you can certainly find, especially in this day and age on the internet, you can find things cheap and in advance, and you can travel very, very cheaply.
And there are great ways. I try to encourage people to work and travel. Like, get yourself a skill so you can teach somebody how to scuba dive. And then you can travel to a place and just, move around and get PADI certification and do something like that. Or
that's great. Yeah. See, I have no skills, so I just have to kind of fake it.
Well, you got your writing school, but in a way, you've done the same thing. You've found a way to travel, and then you've got a job. You can take your wife on a vacation and get your mother a pearl. I mean, you've found a way to.
Yeah, like I never go anywhere now without writing about it. So I'm always on a busman's holiday. Even if I'm not on assignment, I'm eventually going, oh, this is good.
Can you tell us, Andrew, about your first novel, and your first writing was obviously nonfiction, your own experiences, and then you go into writing a novel. It's a big shift, and I'm wondering where that motivation came from.
I was on a television show, and then there was a strike or something, and suddenly I had to sit, one of the people was pregnant, and so we shut down. Suddenly I had 6 weeks where I was doing nothing, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? So I suddenly had an idea. I started writing it down, and I over the next 6 or 7 years, I wrote a novel that never quite worked, and I could never crack it, but I had hundreds and hundreds of pages anyway, and so while I was doing other things I'd written, then I went and wrote the other travel book in the meantime, and I was doing directing and travel writing, but I'd been in the back sort of writing this, and I had this idea. And then one day I was sitting on a plane, and I realized I just one of the characters I always liked, and I suddenly shifted, and I started telling everything from her point of view, and so I just started writing that down.
A 15-year-old girl.
Yeah, a 15-year-old girl. And so again, it's that same feeling of like, oh, there's the book, there I am, there's the book. Who knew my muse was a sort of 15-year-old girl, but I mean, that was, I found me in that book, in that character. So I discarded the hundreds and hundreds of pages I'd had for this other book and just started it all over again from her point of view. But it just goes to, and it came out in like 5 months. But it's just, nothing is wasted. You know what I mean? And you don't know where things going to lead. And that'll lead to that, which leads to that, which leads to that, which leads finally to the good idea. Rarely do you just start. Rarely do I ever start. There's the idea. It takes whatever it takes to get there. So it was just an idea I had, and I wrote it, and finally, and I really wanted it to have a life. And so I kept at it till I found a way to give it a life.
And the name of that book?
That's called Just Fly Away.
Just Fly Away.
Yeah. It's about a girl who finds out she has a brother that she never knew about from an affair her father had.
So what's next? Where's the next trip? Have you got anything booked? I mean, we're here in Dallas. We're both speaking at the Travel and Adventure Show. We both share a love of travel. So you've just come from Budapest, here in Dallas, and then
I'm producing, directing a TV show up in Toronto. So I go back there tomorrow and keep doing that for the next 4 months.
Oh,
so I'll be in Toronto. So I'm not traveling anywhere, unfortunately, except Toronto.
Wow. Do you get did you start chomping at the bit when you?
A bit, yeah. A bit. But it's a nice, it exercises different muscles. I like it, but it does start to feel like, wow. I look at the calendar and I go, that's a long time for me. I've had hundreds of jobs in my life, literally. So, which is weird and good and bad, Yeah. Because there's always the first day of school, every job.
Yeah.
And it's just like anxiety. And so, but anyway, so I'm doing that for the next till September. Yeah.
What I like about the choices that you've made is that you really have listened to your heart ultimately.
I've managed to figure out how to make a living by doing what excites me.
Well, this podcast is called BUCKiT. Ticket before you kick it is the byline. And really the idea is we're just trying to motivate people to do what you've done. We listen to your heart and go after the things that you feel are most important to you. And I speak to so many people who are not doing the things they want to do. And I just said, look, life is a gift. You've got one shot. Just go for it. See where it takes you. You didn't know that all the little paths that you followed were going to lead to
and you don't have to do quantum leaps. It can start incrementally, a little thing. I had no idea doing a play at 15 would lead to a life of acting. No idea writing down a little story in Saigon would lead to a life of being a travel writer, which would lead to books. You had no idea. It's not like you have to know where the end is.
Or that you'd be in the middle of a wheat field,
right? Sobbing like an idiot. So But again, it's always fear that stops us, and I just don't want to be a person. I'm terrified of flying. I'm a travel writer who's traveling all the time, who's terrified of flying. I just made a decision that my fear is not going to stop me.
How do you deal with that? Because really?
Pray and just sort of, it's okay. You know, I imagine myself already there. I imagine I'm already there. So but you know, it doesn't matter. Fear is just fear, and it doesn't. I just decided fear is not going to stop my life.
Yeah,
and
you're going to push past it. Andrew, what is the most valuable lesson you think you can teach your kids? You've got 3 kids, you said. What's the one thing you want to instill in them?
Yeah, just what we've been talking about. I mean, I was talking to my son this morning. He did something dumb last night, and he was telling me about it, which we have open communication. He's 17, so he's trying stuff out in life. And I just said, look, I'm not going to be there, or whoever is not going to be there to guide you. You have an inner guidance system. Learn to recognize it and listen to it. And realize then we're going to mess up, and then because I'm not there to police you, I can't take care of it. I can't whatever. I just listen. That to me, that is the most important thing I can give you, and know that I'm right here. There's a backstop behind you. I'll be right there behind you. But go forth.
That's great advice.
Go forth, and then we'll turn around. I'm right here.
Yeah.
But go forth. But yeah, I think that cultivating and listening to that inner thing is all we have.
And let our kids stumble. Let them fall over. Let them make their mistakes. We can't totally.
I mean, I look back at 17. I see the things I did. I mean, being a teenager or whatever now in the world that we live in, which is all the. Thank God there was no video and there was no Instagramming. So I mean, look at grown-ups with impulse control and sexting and saying this. It's like, I mean, come on, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, thank God most of that didn't exist when I was, because I'd be in a lot of trouble.
That's another podcast. That's another whole thing. The X-rated version of all the things
it's
we
just
did.
Everybody does stupid things, and you learn
know.
from stupid things. And so, but you know, do you want them to ruin your life? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Andrew, there's a couple of questions that I end with in the podcast. And the first question is, if you were going to take a road trip and you could take anybody in the car with you, or you're going to drive across the country, and you could take anybody from any time, any time in history, 3 people that you would take with you.
Oh my God. I suppose I'd take Jesus. He's got some explaining to do. Maybe Mark Twain, so would be entertained along the way, good storytelling. And I don't know, Paul Theroux changed my life. His travel books, you know, they really inspired me, so maybe we'll throw him in there too.
Wow, that's a great carful. Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that. Who's driving the car, by the way?
Oh, well, that would be the whole power struggle, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I figured Jesus should probably have control.
Does he have a license? I mean, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure he can handle it. He knows everything, I guess. And then your last day on Earth. I mean, if you knew it was coming and you had to.
Well, the first thing that popped into my head when you just started that sentence was the Keoghan Beach on Maui. Yeah, it's a place where I feel, you know, when I went, I used to go a lot, and I used to live on Maui for a brief period, and it just feels safe. It just feels beautiful. And so I've always scattered my ashes on Keoghan Beach on Maui. So maybe that's where I'd be.
Well, Andrew, I know you're speaking to about 1,000 people in a couple of minutes.
Let's see if anyone shows up.
Of course they will, with all your incredible stories.
Yeah.
Look, it's a real pleasure talking to you. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your books, let's just name those again.
Just Fly Away is the novel, and Longest Way Home is the travel memoir.
And that one I'm looking forward to reading. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. To see more great interviews, go to philkeoghan.com and subscribe to BUCKiT with Phil Keoghan wherever you get your podcasts. Please consider rating and reviewing us. And follow BUCKiT, that's BUCKiT with an IT, on Instagram and Facebook. Also, follow me on Twitter @Phil Keoghan. See you soon.